Hello and welcome to this week's edition of TCS Student News. I'm your host, Vernon Laumann, here with my co-host.
Caleb Rowe. This will be both of our last broadcasts here at the school since we will both be graduating this year. Thank you for joining us. Hey Vernon, didn't you go to an NRA show over this past weekend?
It was more like a small town gun show to raise money for the volunteer fire department, but there were a lot of supporters for the NRA there. Anyway, this leads into our first story this week. John Lott, the National Rifle Association's favorite academic and gun researcher, had a question for the mostly older white male crowd seated in front of him. He asked how many of them had heard that the U.S. had a uniquely high rate of gun homicide compared to other nations, or that guns make suicide easier. He called all of these statements lies and just a means for pushing the anti-gun agenda. The NRA is now on the defense as it faces off against a country that is mostly fed up with the current gun control laws that did not prevent horrific mass shootings like those that took place in Las Vegas, Sutherland Springs, Texas, and most recently in Parkland, Florida. Trump has reportedly shown his support for the NRA, and it will be interesting to see if there's any move by the president or Congress to make change to the current gun laws.
Employment has been at a high in the U.S. for a while now. Companies in the U.S. are starting to relax policies for hiring people that are currently using marijuana. The high rate of employment in the U.S., as well as the recently altered attitudes for cannabis, is prompting companies to cut the pre-employment drug tests that specifically look for marijuana use. One excuse for this is that an employee taking marijuana before a workday is the same thing or similar to an employee going out and getting drunk before coming into work. Alcohol isn't treated as big a deal as marijuana is. Basically, companies may start hiring more people even if they have a dependency on cannabis, because the drug has become more respected in many communities as a mild drug similar to alcohol. We'll see how the drug affects the motivation and other qualities of the workers who use it when the employment of the users of this particular drug starts going up. Hey Vern, how do you feel about this?
I feel like it will hinder the workers' productivity if they are more or less being encouraged to continue with their harmful lifestyle. The U.S. is running exercises with the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainian soldiers taking part in the counterattack drill will be headed to the real front line very soon. The U.S. is supporting its ally Ukraine in the war against Russian-backed militants. The rebels have seized swathes of territory in eastern Ukraine since 2014, in a conflict that killed 10,000 people by some counts. Colonel William Murphy has been there since November, and he told CBS News the Ukrainians don't have the equipment they need, but what they can do with the little they have is exceptional. The U.S. is still ramping up its support for Ukraine. More than 200 anti-tank missiles were delivered this month. The Ukrainian president wants more weapons from the U.S. and the UN peacekeepers. He says his country is the front line in a new Cold War with Russia.
The U.S. government recently froze funding for the Syrian search and rescue group known as the White Helmets, a group celebrated internationally for their life-saving work. The move is part of an effort initiated by President Donald Trump earlier this spring to reassess broader U.S. spending in the Syrian conflict, which effectively put a halt on $200 million in funding across the board. Here's a quote: "We are actively reviewing our current Syria assistance programs at the President's request, including U.S. support for the White Helmets," a State Department official told CNN Friday, noting that the United States has provided over $33 million to the group since 2013. The leader of the White Helmets, however, stated that they don't receive funds directly from the U.S. government, but from private groups and companies in the U.S. The White Helmets were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize in 2016 for their work in Syria, but Russia and Syria, however, have tried to villainize the White Helmets, blaming them for staging chemical attacks and doing terrorist actions within Syria.
Obviously, the Syrian government doesn't like when their people decide to defend themselves from the ever-present threat of having their houses obliterated by their own military's bombs. It's just not right. Okay, now for some local news here at the school.
Last Friday, we had a special speaker named Paolo Gregory come in. He talked to us about building up our community and unifying the people in it. He also got his point across by using a board game called Cojado, where instead of competing with one another, we cooperated in order to maximize our scores. Thank you so much, Mr. Paolo, for taking time out of your busy day to come speak to us and for showing us Cojado.
Last Saturday, the school was kindly invited to attend an event called Project Runway. The event was a pet show with all sorts of little critters in attendance. We were kindly invited by Mr. Don and Miss Sandy. Everyone who attended had a great time. Thank you both very much for providing this opportunity for us.
We also had some very special birthdays this week. Miss Carol and Miss Peg both celebrated their birthdays this week here at the school. We really appreciate everything that both of you do here at the school, and we're glad you got to spend time with us on both of your special days.
We had our last shadow day of the year on Tuesday. 3 students came in to see what the school was all about. Best of luck to all of you on your high school adventure, and hope you find a future here at TCS.
And congratulations to our Hopkins tutors that are graduating this year. You all have been a big help to Mr. Tom, Mr. Noah, and the school as a whole. We'll miss you guys and hope to see you all soon. Enjoy your summer break.
That about wraps us up for this week's edition of TCS Student News. We'll see you next week.